Hello, it's time for an October veg garden tour and let's have a look at everything that I can harvest this month. I'm Liz Zorab and this is Byther Farm. We moved here in the middle of summer last year, but this year I've created 16 raised beds in this area, and the total veg garden size is the equivalent to a 10 rod or a 10 pole allotment plot. I've got very wide pathways, so if I made pathways narrower, I'd have a lot more growing space, but I've designed the paths like this so that they are really accessible. But I also wanted to be able to store plants in the pathways and still have plenty of space to walk through. And looking around the garden this morning, I realised that there is something in almost every bed that I'm going to be able to harvest between now and the end of the hungry gap as we head from spring into summer. In bed number one, this started the year with broad beans in it, and once I'd harvested those I then replanted. So along the front edge there I've got rainbow chard, including this very beautiful ruby leaf chard. I've got pink, orange, yellow, pale yellow and a deep yellow, and red in there. Don't have any of the white one because I'm actually not that keen on it. So very pleased to have that chard, and then hidden here amongst all these cosmos, and I'm really enjoying the flowers of these at the moment. I'll fight my way through. But yeah, look, they're just so cheerful. I'm so happy to have these at this time of year. Anyway, in the centre there are field of cabbages. Now those are the pointy, the conical ones. They haven't been covered, so caterpillars have got at them this year, but they're beginning to heart up. They're starting to look pretty good. And along this edge I've planted leeks, and they are also beginning to look quite good. A couple of them are probably 2 to 3 centimetres across now. And I don't want these to be ready too early, and in fact I've staggered the planting of the leeks in this garden so that I can harvest them over a longer period. Bed number 2 doesn't look terribly interesting at the moment. It's got lots of dill that's going to seed and some calendula. But along the front edge there are plenty of herbs. So there's lots of thyme, some of it is in flower, others plants not. And I've got some parsley there as well. And then planted in amongst all this are a couple more cabbages. They are netted, so they're doing okay, but the ones at this end got completely eaten by slugs, and so I think I've just got the 2 plants at that end. However, I do have spare plants to go in here. One of the things that I like to keep along the edges of the paths are plants that could go in and would otherwise go to waste. So here we've got a young Cavolo Nero kale, complete with some weeds in it. Just remove those. So I've got some kale plants which I can get in. They will grow. The plants are fairly well established, so they should grow away quite nicely, and they will give us some younger leaves after Christmas and heading in through that hungry gap. To show you how easy it can be to harvest food from your garden all year round, I've written a book. It's called The Seasoned Gardener, and it celebrates the abundance and the sheer variety and wealth of foods, of tastes, of textures and flavours that we can grow in our garden right through the year. The Seasoned Gardener will be published in April 23, but you can pre-order a signed copy now at my website bytherfarm.com/books. Equally, bed number 3 doesn't look all that exciting for a vegetable gardener until you look closely. So there is a scarlet kale there, which is yet to mature, so that will be good for going into the hungry gap. And here are some beetroots, and I've put these in. They're only about 3 to 4 inches high, and I've put them in the hope that in spring they'll put up a flush of new young leaves that we can harvest those, and then in May, maybe towards the end of May, There may be some young beets that we can have as well. They'll have been in the ground for a very long time, but they're going to go semi-dormant during the winter, so they're just going to sit there with their roots in the ground, waiting for it to get warm enough again to start growing. In this corner there's a selection of herbs, and most of these I use for potpourri and for scented oils and things like that. So there's some very sweet thyme, some bergamot, monarda, bee balm. It's got loads of names. This is agastache, which is, I do love the smell of this. It's somewhere between licorice and aniseed, and I can't quite work out which one it is. I think it's more licorice, but it's also kind of menthol. She's sniffing like mad. Sorry about the sniffing. And then in that corner is some Nepeta, I still don't know how to say it. And this is catmint. Oh, look, there's a dock there. Let's get rid of that. And then moving along here, there's lots of forget-me-nots which can be divided and moved around the garden. And some perennial flowers which are now dying down for the winter. Just here are two very small Calabrese. They're not going to do very much now. The flower head on that one is about 3/4 of an inch across, but that's fine. Here is some thyme with a very tiny leaf. It is called, I can't even read my own writing. So it's thyme, and I think that's called glow drift. I'm not entirely sure. But I'm very happy with that. That looks good. I'm just going to pull out a few weeds as I go along. And then in this corner is a non-edible plant. It's a foxglove, but it's an apricot one, and I haven't grown an apricot foxglove before, so I'm really excited about that. And just here is an acer. Now this is, at the moment, it's a small tree, and it is a very slow growing tree, so it's going to be quite some years before it gets big enough to be casting shadow on that bed, or indeed the plants around it. And then over here in bed 4, again there's some scarlet kale, complete with caterpillars. I don't think we need you on there. I'm going to put those into the compost heap. And, well, they didn't quite go in, but they're on. And then a whole load of lupins, which are going to get moved down to the flower field, which will leave me with some brassicas in here. So there are still some Calabrese. Likewise, those aren't going to go through the winter. I'm going to be harvesting the very small heads of Calabrese from those very soon. We've got lots and lots of these Welsh bunching onions, and they are hardy. These were grown from seed this time last year, and I've harvested so many of these. So I pick the leaves and then I chop them and freeze them, and then I've got them for use during the winter. And Mr. J and I have very definitely decided that we prefer the slightly milder taste of these green leaves than we do of bulb onions. Still going to grow bulb onions, but these are for sure our favourites. These rather scruffy nasturtiums have seen better days, but they're producing masses of seeds now, which is great. I've been collecting those and pickling them to use as an alternative to capers. And in here, this feathery, soft plant is a sweet Sicily. Can you tell I really like it? Sweet Sicily, I use a few leaves when I'm cooking rhubarb. It gives it a slightly aniseed taste, but mostly what it does is it takes out that kind of harsh acidity away from the rhubarb. And I've just spotted in there, there is another monarda, bergamot, bee balm, whatever we want to call it. I bought a lot of those to go throughout this garden. They're great for pollinators. I love the smell of them. The flowers are really attractive. So they're all round very welcome plants. They also spread quite quickly, so they become quite good ground cover too. The beds along here, there's two metal raised beds. They contain asparagus that was planted earlier in the year, and also just to fill the beds this year and to keep something growing in that soil, I put in quite a lot of white borage. I also put in some red cosmos. Well, the cosmos is now over, and so I've just got the white borage, and even that now looks like it's seen better days. Bed number 5 has worked really hard this year. So it started the year with ranunculus flowers in it, and in fact I can see rows of them starting to regrow now. And then I put in potatoes, so there was a bed of potatoes here. I've had a super harvest from those. I didn't harvest them all at once, I just harvested plants, one plant at a time, as we wanted them for meals. And then following those, I've put in some yacon. I'm not expecting to get a huge harvest from those because they went in really quite late, but they are growing, so we may get some. And I also put in a squash. Now this is a squash that was given to me by Steph Hafferty. A lot of my squash plants just failed to thrive this year, and luckily Steph came to my rescue and gave me a whole assortment of plants. And so I've got 3 really good sized squash here, plenty enough for Mr. J and I for a meal per squash. I'm happy with those. They still haven't quite ripened yet, and I'm going to leave them here as long as I can until I think there's a risk that they might start rotting from the rain or to get frosted, because I would just like them to mature and cure as much as possible. And at this end of the bed, I've now put in some elephant garlic to go over winter and to harvest next year. And then over here in bed number 6, there's parsley at the front and some chives, bergamot, a very beautiful scarlet kale, which I grew as a filler and as a foil to some of the flowers that were growing in there, and now it will come into its own because we can eat it should we want to. Now Mr. J and I are not hugely keen on the taste of kale, so I'm going to have to experiment this year and find some ways to kind of disguise the taste of it a little bit, because I really want to use that. In the corner here is a skirret. Now skirret is a perennial vegetable grown for its white roots, and I am going to lift and harvest half of the roots of this plant, and when I do I will film that and show you what they're like. And in the centre of the bed I grew some incredible flowers this year. They were foxtail lilies. They were much taller than me. They were absolutely beautiful, and then they died back really early in the year and left the space available for other plants to grow. And I have got some perennials in here again. This is a peony. There are things like galega, which I'm going to be moving. That's not staying. The fennel, however, is staying. So that's a herb fennel, and I like the kind of lightness and fluffiness that it lends to the border. In the corner there is a rosemary, and I'm so delighted with these rosemary plants. I took cuttings of the rosemary plants at our previous house, which were cuttings that I took from a plant at my sister's home, that were cuttings I took from my parents' house. So this is about 4th or 5th generation, but it is still, and it's a clone of a plant that came from my mum and dad's house. Now in the corner here is a yacon, and this may produce some nice tubers this year for eating. They are also about to flower. I love the flowers on yacon. They are like a little small, super small little yellow sunflower. They are really pretty. Yacon you leave in situ until after the frost has blackened the leaves, and after they've started to die back. At that point the tubers really start to fill out. And yacon is another vegetable that I haven't really experimented with enough yet. We quite like the flavour of it raw, grated into salads. I learned this week that if you leave the tubers on the windowsill for a couple of weeks in sunlight, they actually become sweeter, and I would really like to try making some yacon wine. Bed number 7 is still absolutely chock-a-block full of plants, so I'll race through them. There's some more skirrets in the corner there, some thyme, there's a blue borage here, still lots of cosmos going on, another of the very beautiful scarlet kale. Again, in the middle there were foxtail lilies this year. I'm hoping they'll come back next year, but I've also ordered some more to add to it because I like them so much. They have no purpose in a veg garden other than, and very importantly, to bring me a huge amount of joy. Along that side there is some flat leaf parsley. Now, I bought this at a supermarket and divided up the plants and planted them along there. They're now going to flower. They've started bolting, and I'm really pleased that will provide more flowers for pollinators. Our bees are still active on warm days and they're out looking for sources of nectar, so there will be another one there, and it will help to replace the cosmos which are now dying off. And at this end of the bed I can see there's another monarda or bergamot in there. I've got a feeling that is a really scarlet red one. And this then is a Benton's kale. It's a variegated one, so it's possibly Chantilly, but I don't actually know. I just bought it as a variegated. They didn't actually advertise which variety it was. Benton kale is a perennial and the plant will get fairly big. But what I'm going to be doing with this is taking an awful lot of cuttings from it and then moving this main plant into the food forest. And then hopefully a lot of those cuttings will take and I'll be able to get lots more plants out into the garden. Bed number 8 has also worked pretty hard this year. It started off with garlic at this end and some bulb onions at that end, and I interplanted those with red cabbage, a variety called Red Acre, and I've harvested most of the ones at this end. I've still got 2 pretty good sized ones there to harvest and a whole load of them at this end, and I've also got some calabrese. Once those were all harvested, I put in a row of leeks along the edge here, and I've noticed that quite a lot of the garlic that I didn't lift or didn't grow very well last year has now started to regrow. So hopefully next year there will be an unexpected garlic harvest from this bed. Bed number 9 has been, yes, another polyculture this year. So there are strawberries in that end and also a Savoy cabbage, and the variety is Virtus. There is some broccoli here, so that's the calabrese type broccoli. There's a very lovely bronze fennel there, and at this end I thought I had planted some Asturian tree cabbage, and that turned out to be calabrese. So once I'd harvested that, I actually got some Asturian tree cabbage. I've got a couple of plants there. It's a short-lived perennial and it doesn't form a head, like a ball head. You harvest the individual leaves as and when you want them. I've got plenty of herbs in here, like chives and some cloves, which I just love the smell of. The flowers are very, very sweet, and some more of the bergamot or bee balm. In the centre here is another of the white borage plants, which the bees have really enjoyed this year. As soon as it's warm enough for the bees to be out, you will find them on these plants. Bed number 10, again, another polyculture with a whole variety of things in it. So at the end here is a tree peony. I've never had one. I'm so excited to have a tree peony, so I'm very happy about that. I've also put in an Acer, and I don't know about the wisdom of putting them in quite so closely, but we'll find out as the years go on. It's another red leaf Acer, and I want it to grow up and provide some shape and some colour and some year-round interest in the veg garden. So I'm just going to quickly run through what's in here. So there's some agastache. This is Florence fennel, which went to flower before the bulbs had formed for me to harvest them. But I just love the plants. I love the flowers. I've used masses of these in flower arrangements in the house. They smell lovely, and I can still eat the leaves and use those in cooking. And what I have noticed is that they're now sending up a whole load of new young growth, which hopefully will make it through the winter and give us new plants next year. This is ocker. Now, I wasn't going to grow ocker here this year, but I brought some with me in pots. They were just in the pots with other plants when I moved, so I thought, why not? I like the leaves. I think they're really decorative. It makes a really good ground cover, and I've just been told that, like the yacon, if you leave the tubers on the windowsill, they will sweeten up, which means that maybe Mr. J and I will like them after all. In the past, we liked them the first year, then after that we kind of went, not sure we like them, they're a bit too acidic, so we shall see how we get on. There aren't any other veg in here, but if I wanted to harvest something from this bed, I could take some of the fennel leaves. And I don't suppose it'll be very long before I'll be able to take some fennel seeds as well. It's starting to get quite chilly out here, so I am going to speed up a little bit. There are some very nice looking beetroot. This is a variety called Alvara Mono, and the mono means that for each seed you'll just get one plant growing from it, whereas very often beetroot seeds come in clusters, but with the mono you just get one plant per seed, which means that if you're multi-sowing, it makes it really easy to know exactly how many plants you're going to get or potentially get per module. Again, more flowers. Oh, and down here is a golden beetroot, several golden beetroots. I need to come through and harvest those. There's a lettuce, that's a Salanova, Expertise RZ, and then some numbers that I can't remember. And another one of these lovely scarlet kales, which are, the leaves are just so lovely. They've got a red purple rib, and then this very dark purple, very curly scrunched leaf. Bed number 12 has also worked really hard this year. At the front there are some young chive plants, although while I'm looking at them I think there's probably some grass in with them as well, so I might need to lift those. There are those pinks which that give the lovely clove, very sweet clove scent. So there were 2 rows of carrots. There was an Amsterdam 3 and a Chantenay red core. Well, I think I've harvested almost all of those. There's one going to seed there, and I'm leaving that to collect the seeds. And then there was a row of Autumn King carrots between the Canterbury bells and these parsnips. So I haven't harvested any parsnips yet. I'm not going to do so till they've had a really good frost. But the carrots I can see are well overdue for lifting. These are this is an enormous carrot, and slug has got to it a little bit, but this will be fine for taking into the kitchen and using. So I'm going to leave it on the path to make sure that I take it in with me today. The bed behind me here will have some more asparagus in it, but haven't filled it yet, and I'm not putting any pressure on myself to get that filled. Bed number 13 is a half-size bed, and has been absolutely fabulous this year. The reason that it's a half-size bed is that I want to have a pathway coming through here, or actually a tractor way, somewhere that I can bring a large vehicle through here if I want to. So I might not do that, in which case I'll extend this bed and put in some more beds, but I'm leaving myself the option to start with. So a half-size bed, masses of agastache. This has been absolutely covered with bees all summer. And then also in here I've planted 3 globe artichokes, and I'm looking, I can see 1, 2, and maybe the third one might not have made it. Well, that's okay, because I've got one tucked into the pathway over there that's doing very well. And to be honest, I probably only need 1 plant in here. this size anyway, because they do really get very big. I put so many in as almost as an insurance policy. Bed number 14 feels like it's been an absolute triumph this year. It was pretty much the last bed that I made, and certainly the last that I planted up, so I am just delighted with how well it's done. At the end here, this is an annual flowering plant. It's an Nicotiana. I don't remember the name, but I absolutely love it. It doesn't smell of anything at this time of day, but on a warm summer's evening, the fragrance when you're just a little bit away from it is just incredible. Bees have really enjoyed it. This is a Brussels sprout plant. Now I put one in the polytunnel and one out here. The one in the polytunnel has been decimated by caterpillars. This, fingers crossed, doesn't seem to have been too badly hit by them, and I can see some young sprouts growing there, so we will have Brussels sprouts for our midwinter festivities. And this is a low growing Jerusalem artichoke. I've been told it only grows to about 3 feet high. It has dropped a bit over here, or maybe there's a second one over here. And I've been lovingly growing a rose bay willow herb, so I don't really want that. But the low growing Jerusalem artichoke I'm very pleased with. And then along the very edge here, at the deepest part of the raised bed, I have planted some carrots. They are not for harvesting now. I'm going to be harvesting those probably after Christmas. I'm going to just allow them to carry on growing very slowly. I'm going to have a little look. So the one that I looked at, the roots are about pencil thick. Now I will grow some more carrots in the polytunnel to give us some carrots earlier in the year, but I'm hoping these ones we can have maybe January or February. That would be really nice. In bed number 15, starting at this end, is another squash plant. Along the edge here are some rhubarb. In the centre is more yacon, and then across the front is a row of Swedes. Now I didn't grow these from seed. I bought these as small plants in a shop. Swedes are known as rutabagas or Swedish turnips elsewhere, and these have, I've got to say, they have done so well. And the one at the end there is heading towards the size of a football. At the very end here, a couple more chard plants. There's a deep yellow one there and a sort of peppermint pink one there. This bed is going to provide us with quite a lot of food over the next couple of months. We can harvest the chard right through the winter. And the yacon, again, will be coming out, I would guess, at some point in December. And then finally, bed number 16 has got a whole array of things growing in it. So at this back edge, again, there is rhubarb, and I've put in a Nicotiana too, just to give it some height and some instant impact this year. Once the frost really hits here, those will be gone for the year, which I feel quite sad about, as I've enjoyed these. These are the onions that I grew in pots because the onions have started sprouting. There's more agastache and a very pretty coordinating pink cosmos. I seem to have coordinated with the cosmos very well today. Another tree peony. Down there are some shuttlecock ferns, which we'll talk about more in the spring, but parts of those are edible. And then along the front here there are more perennial flowers, which I'll either keep in here or I will transfer down. And at the end here is a sage. I've got to say, I have a newly found love of sage leaves, just fried until they're crisp in some butter. In this garden I grow a lot of perennial vegetables, and if you'd like to find out a little bit more about them, I'll leave a link on the screen, and if you click on that, it'll take you directly through to the video.